Rules Report 9, clerk will read.
Assembly Number 1793-B, Rules Report Number 9, Ms. Nolan, an act to amend the Workers' Compensation Law.
An explanation is requested, Ms. Nolan, but we will wait for a minute so that you don't have to scream. You've used your voice enough today. Shh. Shh. Please settle down.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill expands the state's temporary disability insurance program to provide paid family leave. Right now, our country is one of very few in the industrialized world that does not really guarantee paid family leave. So when a worker faces a family medical crisis or wants to bond with their newborn child, they are forced to take unpaid leave or perhaps even leave their job altogether. This really important piece of legislation that has been a priority of the Assembly majority in various forms for over 10 years would help ensure that workers who cannot afford to just, leave for weeks and come back to a job or leave a job altogether, this bill will help ensure that workers can afford to address family issues while remaining employed. California, New Jersey, Rhode Island, and Washington have adopted similar legislation, and it is really time for New York to adopt this truly vital protection for our families. And I am so happy, Mr. Speaker and my colleagues, that this bill is part of an important day filled with legislation, proposed legislation, that would help people through the results of our Child Care Task Force and other initiatives that Speaker Silver has undertaken. And I'm very happy to have this conversation and the support of many members on both sides of the aisle. Thank you, Mr. Speaker and my colleagues.
Thank you, Ms. Nolan. Ms. Corwin?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the sponsor yield?
Will the sponsor yield?
Certainly.
Sponsor yields.
Thank you, Ms. Nolan. Now, my understanding in terms of the way this bill is structured, it would actually add to the definition of a disability, adding the concept of family care, and it would also create a paid benefit for it.
Well, it would create a paid benefit, and it would utilize something called the Temporary Disability Insurance Program. And I will say, Mr. Speaker, my colleagues, I've always found that amusing because the Temporary Disability Insurance Program started in 1949 as a way to assist veterans returning from the war effort. So it's existed as a part of the workers' compensation law for a very long time, but the name has not been upgraded to reflect the important work that it does. And so by changing and allowing a small employee contribution, I want to stress that, employee contribution, there will be enough in the TDI to allow people to utilize it for family leave, including child care, the adoption, or the birth of a newborn child. So that's why we've expanded what it can be used for. We're also putting more money into it.
So what you're saying here is, the current disability cost to an employee is 60 cents per week, I believe. We're talking about adding 45 cents per week,
right.
maximum.
It's remarkable, isn't it?
For this family care benefit. Now you're saying this insurance program is going to pay all the difference?
Right. It's really remarkable, and I think a testimony to the people who had these jobs before we did in the 1940s, that they had the foresight to put this type of a sophisticated insurance program operated by our workers' comp system together. So yes, for basically $1 a week, the employee will be able to have this expanded program. There is a provision in the law, and I want to thank our wonderful counsel who's worked very hard. There is a provision that would allow employers who use the state insurance fund and I guess do some other private.
Yes, because my understanding, Ms. Nolan, is that that's because currently, in the current disability benefit system without the family care, those costs are not fully covered. The employer has to make up the difference. And, when you talk to employers around the state, both large and small, it's a very, very sizable amount that they're paying out right now. So now you're saying to me that with this new system, they wouldn't have to pay any more with the family care benefit?
I don't know how they would. This is a benefit that will allow a self-funded, if you will, employee contribution of 40 cents a week that will help people utilize the provisions of the Federal Family Medical Leave Act, which may be what the member is talking about now. Which I remember very well, a Republican member of Congress, Marge Ruckema, was the main force behind the Unpaid Family Medical Leave Act and how important it is. But we certainly want to do whatever we can in our state to make it easier for employers to provide these benefits. And the fact that we could now have a paid family leave utilizing this temporary disability fund is really a great thing. Great thing for employers as well as employees.
Yes, Ms. Nolan, if I may also, just to get back to it, so the structure of this family care benefit, it looks to me like we're modeling it after the Federal Family Medical Leave Act in terms of defining what who the family members are and what the family care entails. Is it structured that way?
Right. We've expanded it in certain
okay.
aspects, but yes.
Yes, certainly. And I'm getting to that point here where currently the federal system defines family member as a spouse, parent, or child. However, in your bill, it would expand the definition greatly to include domestic partners, grandchildren, siblings, parents of a spouse or a domestic partner. So it greatly expands the number of people to which we would be providing care that the employee would
It's wonderful, isn't it? It's wonderful, Mr. Speaker and my colleagues. The modern family, grandchildren, domestic partner, spouse, it's wonderful. That's what New York does. We're the Empire State. We're pushing forward. We have an insurance program that does it. It's 45 cents a week. It's great.
So then, do we have any estimates in terms of the percentage increase in the number of people who may actually utilize this benefit? Because right now, under the federal system, an employee can take care of a spouse, parent, or child. Now we're talking about the parent of a domestic partner or the parent of a spouse. Certainly, I think the number of opportunities to utilize this benefit and therefore the cost of the benefit could go up substantially.
I just want to clarify our answer so we're correct. The TDI itself, this temporary disability benefit that's existed since 1949, that you pay, that employers, by the way, have paid into since 1949, the 60 cents a week. And I don't think that amount's gone up in 25 years. So that's been something employers for 25 years have only had to pay 60 cents a week for employee. But that's used by very, very few people. As a matter of fact, one of the reasons we want to change this, though I would love to change the name too, and I think, pregnancy, of course, is not a disability, but we need to, perhaps change some of our language. But it's very important to recognize that this important fund, which has millions of dollars in it and has not had an increase of cost to the employer in 25 years, has enough money in it, remember, not that it'll be going in, coming out, that we can expand the definition of what's family medical leave to keep current with the modern families we have today, have the additional contribution by the employees, which will make sure that there is enough in it for everyone. And yes, right now, I don't believe enough people take family leave, unpaid or paid.
Ms. Nolan, if I may, I've got quite a few questions here.
We have all day, Assemblywoman Corwin, all day to answer them.
Oh, okay, great. I only have 15 minutes, so
I'd be happy if you took your second 15 and we can talk even
all
more.
right, and we
Thank you very much.
We may just have to do that. Okay, talking about the increased dollar amount of this benefit. Now, right now, the way your bill is written, it would increase the benefit from 50% of the employee's weekly wage, not to exceed $170 per week, to 2/3 of the employee's wage, 66% of the average weekly wage. But it would increase the maximum weekly benefit to 50% of a statewide weekly average. So we're looking at increasing that $170 limit and making it 50% of the statewide average wage. Do you have a sense of what that number is?
It's a better number.
It's a big number, actually.
No. Perhaps you didn't hear me. I said it's a better number. You want me to keep my answer short, so I'll do my best to do that. It's $170 right now. It would be a little bit more than that.
Yeah, actually, it would bring it in the first year to about $600.
That's not correct, Mr. Speaker.
Okay, well, that's the number I have. Actually, other numbers that have been provided are higher than that. That's the lower of the estimates based on some of the groups that have weighed in on this. But if you look at the, do you have an estimate as to what the increase would most likely be in real dollars? Like when we translate that into the cost or the level of benefit? I mean, the numbers I'm looking at would triple the benefit by 2018, which means in just 3 years, the cost to an employer would triple.
The current statewide average weekly rate the maximum benefit for an employee in 2015 would be about $250 more than the $170 provided. Obviously, Mr. Speaker and my colleagues, $170 a week is not enough for anyone to take paid family leave. But the modest sum of, say, $400 a week, which is not a lot of money, someone could do the math for me what that is over 52 weeks. That, however, would be enough for many families to take, many families to take paid family leave. So it's a modest increase. I think it's a manageable increase. It certainly is not $600, and it is not big money. It is an adequate amount.
If I may just clarify here, the 2012 average wage is $1,200. And
Correct.
if you kept that as the average wage, then by 2018 you're talking $600. Now, we know with inflation and so on at a minimum that the average wage will be going up, so that $600 will go up as well. So that brings the number up quite a bit. Now, if we can just...
I think that's a hypothetical. Inflation has not been an issue in many, many years in our state. I don't know where the gentlewoman gets her facts from, but inflation has
Actually, Ms. Nolan, I get that
that
statistic every day when I watch CNBC. You'd be amazed at the numbers that are on there when it talks about inflation. Inflation may not seem like a problem right now, but every year it goes up. But let's move on,
but the facts are still hypothetical about what would happen in 2018.
I still have many questions, Mr. Speaker, if we can move on, please. Let's talk about the size of the employers, the businesses, who would be required to pay this benefit. Now, under the federal Family Leave Act, then employers who have fewer than 50 employees are carved out. Does your bill do that for small businesses?
Because the employee pays the cost, we have this version of the bill includes all employees.
Yes, it does include all employees. And, you know, the concern or the issue that was raised at the federal level when this discussion was coming up is how onerous this could be on a small business. I think about, you know, your local dry cleaner, you know, the convenience store owner, someone like that, having to pay triple in terms of their unemployment insurance or their premiums in just 3 years. I mean, I've had employers come to me and say that would wipe them out. So we aren't making any kind of consideration for small businesses in this?
Ms. Nolan?
We believe we answered the colleague's question when we said that employees pay the cost, 40 cents a week from the employee. And since everyone does pay into the TDI now, we think that it's a very modest sum for the employee to pay. And since the employer contribution has not been raised in 25 years and is only 60 cents a week, we think that this is something that will help small businesses in a very manageable and affordable way and allow them to retain dedicated and hardworking and trained employees who can then take a short amount of time for paid family leave.
Unfortunately, as it is, the way the provisions in the bill do line out is that the employer would have to make up the difference in the family care costs. But that we can go on to that. I'll certainly get to that at the end. But if we can talk about public employers now. I believe this bill allows for public employers to opt in at the discretion of employee organizations. Now, does the federal act, does the private sector have that option as well? Or are we just affording that discretion or that ability for public unions?
We think our understanding of what we wrote is it covers all private employers. And I want to correct something I said. The 60 cents is actually the amount the employee also pays that the employer, I guess, can add some additional subsidy in other private plans. So it's actually $1 a week, $1.05 a week for the employee, which, again, is one reason we think it's a very manageable amount for everyone.
And so I'm understanding as well, since you had in your bill here made small businesses be a part of this whole process and forcing them to have to shell out triple the money that they were previously. What about family farms? I know family farms are very, very concerned about this. Have they been exempted, or do they have the option to be able to opt out or opt in to this plan?
We'll check. We think family farms do pay into the TDI now. We'll have somebody double check that. I want to correct the impression that we're asking anyone to shell out anything, we are asking employees, workers, employees, to pay a little bit more to allow them to take paid family leave. It has nothing, there is no cost to employers in this bill except the recognition that people will be able to leave work for a bit and come back. And that is certainly challenging for employers. I thought there'd be more questions about that, but there's certainly no financial cost, frankly. And so to say shell out for small businesses is an incorrect statement, at least to me and to many of us who support the bill. We don't think that's a correct statement.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Ms. Nolan, for all your information on the bill, Mr. Speaker.
On the bill, Ms. Corwin.
Thank you. Clearly, the sponsor of the bill and I have a very clear disagreement in terms of what the responsibility would be to employers. I'm reading from existing law, disability law right here. It says, let's see, for disabilities resulting in injury, sickness, or pregnancy, in excess of the contributions collected from his employees to the extent and in the manner provided in this article, let's see, the employer shall contribute the cost of providing the disability benefits. So that's in existing law. So we can talk about outside plans from the World War II, whatever. At the end of the day, we all know, and all the businesses in this state know, that they are on the hook for paying the difference. Now, the difference in benefit, we're talking from going to $170, which I absolutely agree is too low and should be increased. But we're talking about tripling or possibly quadrupling that benefit in 3 years. And we're making sure that small businesses, local dry cleaners, the local convenience store owner who might have 3, 4, and 5 employees, that they have to participate. They have no choice but have to participate in this program, which means their costs are going to triple or skyrocket at the very minimum. So certainly to try to make the point that employers are off the hook is absolutely false. I categorically go against that. I will be back for my next 15 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Certainly, Ms. Corwin. Mr. McLaughlin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the sponsor yield?
Ms. Nolan yields, Mr. McLaughlin. She yields.
Thank you. Ms. Nolan, you're surprised there weren't some more questions about employers. I have a few. The federal standard exempts employers with 50 or less employees, correct? Can you turn on her mic, Mr. Speaker?
Sorry.
I can't hear anything.
Why don't we have you ask it again, then? Maybe I misunderstood.
I think you said yes, right? Does the federal law exempt employers that have 50 or less?
Yes.
Any idea why it exempts it?
I don't know if Marge Rukema is still around or even still alive, but I remember at the time she felt that it might be difficult for smaller employers to have someone leave. But since that's not what this is about, and it's changed in a great way how women are in the workforce, it's an opportunity using the TDI that our state is lucky enough to have. It's not a question of whatever. It's a question of an important workers' comp insurance program that's existed since 1949 that, fortunately for us, our predecessors in these jobs had the wherewithal to put in place that gets money every week from employees in our state. And that will provide the basis to assist the small employer. They have it now. Employers under 50 have people take leave because they give birth now. This is a way to ensure that the employee comes back and that you have access to that trained workforce.
This is not at all about that. And are you saying that the problems that existed prior no longer exist for a small business owner? Because I kind of think every small business owner in the country would disagree with that. But do you think that because there's women in the workforce that the problems of an employer don't exist when there are less than 50 employees?
That's not what I said.
Yes, it is.
No, I don't think that's what I said, but I'll speak very carefully so that there's no mistake. It is challenging for small business to have someone leave when they give birth or have someone leave if they have to take care of an elderly parent. The original Family Medical Leave Act allows unpaid leave There's a sense now, I think, as the workforce has changed to reflect more people going to work who are having families and have the ability and the need to take care of older parents, that we can construct a mechanism to support and enhance the unpaid leave, which, let's face it, many people have never taken, particularly low-wage workers, because there's a chance they would lose their job. Now, it's not supposed to happen, but it does happen. So now we have an incentive. We have a temporary disability fund, which will allow people to get a modest $170 a week. And yes, as we move forward, it would go up to a big $400 a week. But it's a way to give people some paid family leave. They can come back to work, and it doesn't cost the employer more than it would, since the employee is paying the 40 cents extra a week.
You do understand the concept of opportunity cost, and I'm sure you understand that. And let's just say, for example, that I'm a pharmacist up here in this part of the state, and I have some, I don't know, 5 or 10 employees, and 2 or 3 of them are out on leave at the same time. You don't view that as a hardship for me, the pharmacist, who may have another job as well?
Well, I think we all recognize, Mr. Speaker, my colleagues, that happens now. That happens now with no provisions from anything, no help to that employer at all.
They're exempt from it, madam.
No, but people are still having the babies. They're not having the babies or having the sick parents.
You keep going back to giving birth.
1 minute, Mr. Would we allow the question and then the answer, and not interfering the answer?
Answer would be great, actually, the question I'm asking, but...
Thank you. I do my best. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think I tried to point out, and I thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me the order. I think that we do our best to recognize the reality of the workforce in 2014. And if I owned a pharmacy, and I actually know people that own pharmacies, right? I can see one right in my mind's eye on Vernon Boulevard. He's had employees have a baby and leave the job for a certain number of weeks now, and he has worked that out because he wants his trained employee coming back. Whether there's an unpaid leave act, whether it applies or it doesn't apply, the reality in the workforce now is that employers do make arrangements when they can. This should be an inducement and a good thing, because it will allow the employee to get a small check, making it that much more likely that they'll be back to come and work for that pharmacist. And I might add, Mr. Speaker, my colleagues, like many of us, I too have family members that, are involved in small businesses. My late father-in-law was a pharmacist and owned a pharmacy. And, people talk all the time about how they want to get their employees an opportunity to take care of an elderly parent and what have you. So this is a way, we think, a good way. Nobody wants to hurt small business here. This is a good way to reflect the reality of the workplace today and do something for our families, our working families.
Well, I'm curious if it's a good way to do it, why there's such opposition to it from the business community. In fact, I see no support from it from any segment of the business community.
I think that as the bill is revealed and voted on, I really hope that we will get that kind of support. I think as time goes on, I bet you if this became law tomorrow, the business community would embrace it, because they would know that their trained employees can come back to work and they would have a better, more productive workforce. And I think history shows us that many of these programs that we've adopted in our country and in our state that give us the kind of high quality of life we enjoy, initially were greeted with some concern in the business community and then embraced going forward as a great thing that allows people to really live up to their full potential.
So if you're saying, I guess, apparently that we have to pass the bill so that the business community can see what's in it, assuming apparently that the business community hasn't already read this bill. Is this the first? Oh, wait, it isn't. 2009, 10, 11, 12, and 13, this bill has been up and died every single year in the Labor Committee. This year, somehow, it's made it to the floor. Are you saying that since 2009, the business community hasn't had time to read this bill?
There have been versions of this bill, Mr. Speaker. My colleagues, in 2005, we passed a version of this bill that was somewhat different. So that's part of the push and pull of Albany. There's lots of versions, lots of attorneys that come up with different ways to achieve these goals. But I think this version is part of the Assembly Majority's child care package today, and a really important and necessary step forward. And again, I want people to understand, I want my colleagues to understand, we want to be supportive of all of our businesses. That's our tax levy in the state. But we think this is a positive step that will not make it impossible for them. We think this is achievable and achieves a good goal.
I'm so pleased to hear that. I'm also shocked, really, that we're so friendly to businesses, considering we're number 50 on the list of business-friendly states. And in fact, the state that is number 49, I think, is New Jersey. They even have the exemption for small business. So why are we not at least kind of matching up with what the federal guidelines are, or our neighboring state, and exempting small businesses with 50 employees or less? That, to me, would send a signal to the small business community, which is, by and large, is our largest employer in mass in the whole in New York State. It's those small businesses that we always say are the backbone of the community. There is a specific reason they were exempted, and we're ignoring it here, and I don't think it's the right thing to do, but I'd like to hear from you.
Was that a question?
That's a question. I'd like to hear from you on why. I don't understand why you think it's a solid thing to, or a positive move to not exempt employers with 50 or less. What do you do if you're a guy with 3 or 4 employees and you lose 2 of them? You don't have that excess labor, but yet it is, trust me, costing you a lot of money to not have that. And that's where I'm going with that.
We think by making employees solely responsible for the cost of the program, we've dealt with those concerns. And we think that the addition of paid family leave, similar to New Jersey, California, and other states that are great economic engines, as New York State is, are the way to go to support all workers.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, on the bill.
On the bill, Mr. McLaughlin.
This bill, another one-house wonder, no Senate sponsor, and probably for good reason. These are the bills that keep New York solidly rooted in the 50th position in business friendliness. We ignore the needs of the small business community over and over and over again. That's why we're number 50. That's why there's no support from the business community, and has never been support for from the business community. Small employers, they love their employees just like hopefully the big employees do. A lot of times they're family. They want to help them. But there's also the reality of doing business in a state like New York that is exceptionally difficult. This bill does not do anything to improve the business climate, and as a result, in the long run, cost jobs when businesses go under because they have to deal with onerous regulations like this. So I am therefore urging a no vote.
Thank you, Mr. McLaughlin. Ms. Corwin, for your second time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On the bill.
The bill, Ms. Corwin.
Thank you. I just wanted to continue my thought there since we were running out of time. Excuse me. We keep talking about this sense of fairness, and I keep hearing, well, we have to be fair, we have to take care of people, we have to make sure that everyone's treated well. Unfortunately, this bill stands in opposition to that, because if we were trying to be fair and reasonable, why would we give the public employers the ability to decide whether or not they want to participate in this program, but still force small businesses to have to be a part of it? Small business is the backbone of this state. It's the backbone of this country. At one point, not too long ago, 98% of the jobs in this country were in small businesses. If you talk to small business organizations, you talk to individual small business owners throughout the state, and I was the head of a task force that combed the state over many years discussing these issues with people, they will tell you how onerous disability already is for them as it exists today. Adding this in makes it far, far worse. You can't triple the cost to a small business in 3 years and expect them to not it to not negatively impact their job opportunities. We need jobs in this state. We need jobs throughout this country. This is a job killer because we're killing small businesses. I was a small business owner many years ago. It became a nice-sized business. And let me tell you, all of these costs directly impact job opportunities. What we should be doing is increasing the number of jobs, making jobs more accessible to people so that they can improve the quality of life. This is not going to help them. It will ultimately end up hurting them. And I strongly urge a no vote on this bill.
Thank you, Ms. Corwin. Mr. Goodell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the sponsor yield?
Ms. Nolan, will you yield? Ms. Nolan yields, Mr.
Yes.
Goodell.
Thank you, Ms. Nolan. I want to get a little bit of clarification, if I could, on the cost of this program. I see that section, I guess it's on page 3, talks about an employee contribution to help pay for this. which is up to 45 cents per week. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes.
And I see it says up to. What's that mean? Does it could be less than 45 cents a week?
Yes.
Who determines whether it's 20 cents, 30 cents, or 45 cents?
The employer, I guess, in their package with the workers' comp board or with a private insurer could negotiate a different rate for their employees.
So this bill caps it, though, at 45 cents.
Yes.
And is that cap in any way related to any actuarial studies that we currently have on the cost?
Yes.
And who did the actuarial studies?
If the bill was to become law, our workers' comp board would be, I guess, have to do an actuarial study. Right now, our staff use research from the state of California and New Jersey and the other states to help extrapolate this information and come up with the figures. So we're using the best research we have available to us.
So at this point, it's our best guess based on the experience from other states, but we have not contracted with or had any independent actuarial analysis?
No, certainly the executive could ask the workers' comp board to do that, and I would imagine that might be something that they're considering. But right now, there's not been any separate study.
Since this bill caps the employee contribution at 45 cents per week, if it turns out the actual costs are higher than 45 cents per week, who pays the difference?
Until 2016, it's capped at 45 cents. So we feel that the fund is large enough to balance whatever would come out of it. After that, there might have to be a revision, and perhaps the employee would have to pay a little bit more.
The employee or the employer?
The employee would pay more if the costs went up.
Is there any hold harmless in terms of the cost to employers? Because it's my understanding the way the system currently works, on the base payment of 60 cents per week, if workers' comp costs more than 60 cents per week, the employer picks up the difference. And you're amending the same section to say for the family care provision, it's capped at 45 cents. So am I correct, by law, until 2016, if there's a shortfall, the employers would pick up the difference?
For the family care benefit, the employees are solely responsible. So we're not asking employers, mindful of the concerns of small business, for example, we're not asking the employers to pick up any additional costs.
Is there any language in your bill that says the employers have no additional financial liability if the cost exceeds 45 cents per week?
Yes, there is.
Where is that, please?
Our counsel's going to get it so I can read it to you right now.
Thank goodness for counsel, right?
Oh, always, always.
Always. I had another question.
I consider that one of the greatest strengths of the place, that we can rely on wonderful counsels to help us understand all the legalities. I am not an attorney. I know you are, Mr. Goodell, but I'm very happy to ask our counsel to find the actual section.
I'd like to bring your attention or your counsel's attention to page 6, starting on line 45.
Yes, we're looking at the same section. That's wonderful.
Actually, line 47. Isn't that language clear that the employer contribution goes up if the 45 cents is inadequate?
Right, you see that. Right. There is, if you notice when you read it, I love this part. When you read line 49, it says for disability resulting from, that's the current stuff. Then if you go down to line 56, I guess it is, or no, a little further on page 7 on line 17, it talks about family care benefits. So there's actually would be two sets of benefits in the TDI, the current disability benefits and then a new section of family leave benefits paid for by employees.
Well, I guess I'm wrestling with just a fundamental problem, and that is if the employee's cost is capped at 45 cents, and if that 45-cent cap is not based on an actuarial study but is extrapolation from other states, if it's not enough, what happens? We know we can't increase the employee contribution, so either we run out of money or we use the existing fund balance, which results in the employers being required to contribute somewhere else, or the employer. Somebody has to pick it up. So my question is, if there's a shortfall, who pays?
Well, the fund is available in the event of that hypothetical, but we don't believe the research we've done that will happen in this 2-year period of introduction of this. Very few people take the unpaid family leave. It's going to take a while to ramp this up. There are high-end employees. Some of you may represent districts where people are making a lot more than $170 a week or $400 a week. So there are people that for whom this benefit will never be, they're in a different type of work. They're attorneys or people in attorneys, professional people that may not need this type of benefit. But for the lower wage worker, this is an opportunity to have a decent subsistence is not the right word, but a decent wage coming in for a limited amount of time. Not that 400 is a lot or 170 is a lot, but it's something that would allow people to be able to care for their child for a few weeks or care for that elderly parent for a few weeks and then return to work. So we don't anticipate, I understand we have to consider every hypothetical that we can think of on the floor, but the research shows that that will not happen, especially in such a short period, 2 years, where we're putting this into effect. And we think this is a great step forward for the families that we have today and for the employers to be able to guarantee a trained and good workforce where people know they don't have the anxiety, where they have the peace of mind that they can take care of their elderly parent or their newborn child and return to work.
One other question, the definition of child. Obviously it includes a biological child, but this definition also includes foster children that you might be watching under a program funded by DSS where you're paid to watch them.
It certainly would include adopted children. Foster care, I guess we'll get an answer on that. We think it would, yes.
And it also includes stepchildren, right?
Yes.
So if someone has a child that's under the age of 1, you could have 4 parents taking disability. I mean, the biological father, stepmother, biological mother, stepmother, and if the child's put up for adoption, presumably the foster parents as well. You could have 6 people all taking disability during that first year.
I don't know that we would have too many examples like that, but I suppose it's theoretically possible. That child will be getting a lot of good care. I tell you that, all those adults taking care of that newborn.
Well,
but I don't believe that we're looking at it. I don't see that scenario, but again, we try to think of every possibility here. I would remind the gentleman that obviously in most adoptions, the parents who are adopting the child don't know who the biological parents are, so they wouldn't be aware necessarily that they took leave.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Nolan. On the bill.
On the bill, Mr. Goodell.
I appreciate the desire by Ms. Nolan to extend disability benefits to people to enable them to bond with a newborn up to the age 1. I think it's a laudable goal. I appreciate her desire as well to have those who are benefiting from this take advantage to pay additional. Of course, many employees would be paying the extra 45 cents a week even though they have no children or not of child-rearing age. So it's a cost to all employees, of course, across the state. And my concern, which I guess I still don't quite understand, is that this bill sets the maximum employee contribution at 45 cents a week. We don't have an actuarial study based on New York's situation. We've done some extrapolation from other states that have different laws, and hopefully that was helpful. And when I ask what happens if the 45 cents is not enough, well, it'll be paid for from the fund. And that's not our general fund, by the way. That's the disability fund. And that fund is funded by the employers. And so at the end of the day, employee contributions are capped at 60 cents per week for general disability and 45 cents per week for this. And all the rest of the expenses come out of the pocket of the employers. There's no other source other than those 2 sources. So my concern is, while I support the desire of making more time available for parents who select to have or decide to have a child. That's a laudable goal. This bill extends it, by the way, to stepchildren and foster children. And foster children are a situation where the parents are being paid by social services to take the children in. So they're getting paid by social services, and they'll get disability on top of that. And the fundamental problem that we have is we are increasing, ultimately, the cost to employers, and that results in a less competitive situation in New York and fewer employers and fewer jobs. So for those reasons, I recommend that we not proceed with this bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Goodell. Read the last section.
This act shall take effect immediately.
Clerk will record the vote. Ms. Nolan to explain her vote.
Just want to thank Speaker Silver and the team of the New York State Assembly, Luann Saccone, Jen Best, John Savare, Elizabeth Booty, and Jermaine Brookshire, all of whom worked really, really hard to put this bill together. I want to also thank Assemblyman Bronson, who was our counsel way back when we first put this on the floor. It means a great deal to me that we are moving in this direction in the Assembly majority to support working parents, to come up with something that we think is manageable for employers, but will really, really reflect the needs of our modern families as we go forward in a fuller and happier workforce, if you will, a highly trained workforce that enhances the economic viability of our great state of New York. So I'm happy to cast my vote in the affirmative. And again, I want to thank all of you really for doing such a wonderful job in drafting this bill. Thank you.
Ms. Nolan in the affirmative. Mr. O'Donnell to explain his vote.
I'd like to just commend the sponsor and the Child Care Task Force that have worked so hard to bring this forward. I also, as a person who has had family members in foster care, it is rather disturbing to me to think that the care of that child should be perceived or viewed as less than the care of a child that's born from a parent or adopted, just because those parents were willing to take a child in need into their home. If that child were to get sick or ill or have a deadly disease that required the full-time caretaking, I certainly hope our state would be compassionate enough to understand that that parent who's parenting a foster child should be treated the same way under all our laws as children who are born through more traditional manners, or those children who were lucky enough to have parents choosing to adopt them and take care of them. I will be voting in the affirmative.
Mr. O'Donnell in the affirmative. Mr. Hasty to explain his vote.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just wanted to take this opportunity to thank the Speaker and all my fellow members of the Child Care Work Group for their tremendous work in putting together this package, and also to really acknowledge the staff who did a tremendous job in assisting us as the members. A lot of times we get the glory, but in times it's the staff that really does the work. So I just wanted to take this opportunity to thank everybody who participated in the work group. And I will withdraw my request and vote in the affirmative.
Mr. Hasty in the affirmative.